Hello everyone, and good day to you. It is myself, Jonathan, also known as the PC Genie, and today I'm going to be doing a review. I've already reviewed these rolling swords, so, well, you can guess, probably because my hands look so bulky, it's these! They're basically the Red Dragon Gauntlets, and basically they are, to put up a sort of a background to them, they are, well, basically gloves that were designed specifically for things like Western martial arts and historical European martial arts to fill a sort of gap in a market. Now, granted, some people who practice such things are, can actually do perfectly okay using certain other types of gloves. The most common I hear being used are Lacrosse Gloves. Personally, before I had these, which I very generously received for free from a friend, a Canadian friend, you know who you are, thank you very much. Yeah, basically I had cricket gloves before these, and didn't do too well. Now, if you look at usual sorts of things like cricket, lacrosse gloves, those sorts of things, obviously you've usually got these sorts of hand pads and your sort of broad finger pads. I'll give you a closer look here. So you've got those sorts of things. Now, as you can see, these articulate properly and fully, like you'd expect. And very similarly to medieval gauntlets, these have been designed that if I curl my finger, you might be able to see, there's a sort of lip, a sort of area where it sort of dips down, almost like a step or a shelf, and then you've got a slight overlap. So then, even if my hands are fully enclosed, like say, well, obviously grasping any kind of weapon like a sword, that means that there aren't going to be any gaps exposed. Now, so unlike certain gloves like cricket gloves, they do actually feel very manoeuvrable because they essentially sort of pivot on that, even though they're not using rivets and pins and things like that. They've still got that full flex and motion. Whereas on some, like my cricket gloves and other things, sometimes, although they're foam pads or things like that that just fully cover the fingers, because they're all one solid piece, you feel a sort of elasticity, something trying to pull your hands open. It can be a bit discomforting. Again, it's personal preference, but it is useful having the ability to fully close your hands, but yet still have the full protection, and on top of that, not have it trying to elastically pull your hands open, but be able to concentrate on what you're trying to do. Apart from that, you get certain other modifications which do help a lot. So with these, you have got, if I show you here on this side, you see these white pads here, and you also get them just underneath around here. That is something that you tend to see missing on a lot of, sort of glove designs. And on top of that, actually it also goes around here, so it extends down the hand as well. So they're separate plates, and granted, if you're extremely unlucky, someone could catch you, especially if you're using more solid steels, and could catch you in one of those gaps and maybe still be able to do quite a bit of pain and injury to your hand. But it's a lot less likely to happen with these designs of gauntlets. And on top of that, one thing that I really do love about these gauntlets is that one of the most commonly, unprotected areas in gauntlets, in gloves, has actually been covered, and that is, if you look here, it's just around this bit, which is of course just in between a finger and thumb. So you could be there holding again something like a sword, and then someone could get something that could, sort of catch in there, and maybe catch you in that gap in between. And it's unlucky, but unfortunately, because of the positioning of the hand and the way you are in certain moves and maneuvers, or in different stances and things like that, sometimes when you get struck, it is on top of the hand. And with the way it's I think maybe the way it's guided from the sword blade of your own, or just the fact that it's the best flat surface without going around and hitting the hand from the side. Bearing in mind there's a lot of basic hits people do are very much sort of either diagonal or straight vertical. It means that that part of the hand gets hit surprisingly often, and the same applies to thrusts as well. So you might be, parrying and defending, maybe trying to catch the blade and guide it to the side so it just goes harmlessly past you. But if you fail to do that, they might, well, catch and stab into that part of the hand again, which is something that other gloves fail to cover. So again, with these, it is very useful. Besides that, you've got these very tough knuckle plates. I mean, seriously, you could hit them full speed and full strength with good steel two-hander, and these you'd hardly feel them. But granted, with the rest of the gloves, it's, well, I'd say they're definitely perfect for nylon fencing, or perhaps again things like wooden wasters, things like that. But when you start moving into things like blunt steel swords, the pads, you can still end up feeling quite a bit through them. And that's why some people actually don't use these types of gauntlets with full fingers that I prefer, and actually switch to ones like the ones from Spez, which are sort of crab claw mitten style gauntlets, which actually, because of the whole solid plates, which are still articulated, so you've got that full closability and same advantages here, but by having those individual solid plates, it spreads the force a lot more. And I've seen people using them, and they've been hit full whack, and the sorts of things that would literally break their hands, but yet wearing these gauntlets, they hardly notice it. They feel like, oh, alright, I've been struck there, no problem. Sorry, excuse me, the asthma's getting to me. But yes, with these, obviously there is the advantage of being able to do the full finger dexterity, which is especially useful if you're doing more sort of dexterous, more unusual types of manoeuvres, so then being able to manipulate with your individual fingers more helps a lot with that, so you can do more skilled moves and not have to physically think about getting over those restrictions, trying to go, close that. Okay, it's not that bad, but you know what I mean. But yeah, again, with those individual fingers, it does present a bit of a weakness. And with in between the fingers, although it's very rare that you're going to get struck there, unless you're doing something like maybe you're trying to maybe grapple or those sorts of things. These are a sort of a two-edged sword, to pardon the usage of such a phrase, which also doesn't make sense if you think about it. Anyway, more of that maybe in another video. But yeah, the advantage is that if you're doing things like close play, with your full finger dexterity, it's very useful to be able to do things like grapples, throws, disarms and takedowns really effectively. Particularly useful when you're grabbing the opponent's weapon or around the hand and trying to manipulate it out of them and then, win. Whereas with things like crab style gauntlets or mittens, it's a lot more of a tricky manoeuvre, and they might have enough of a leeway, enough advantage left to be able to escape out of that and do something else, which of course in that case it's better having these. But the flip side, the disadvantage, is that if you are perhaps trying to go in, to close distance to do the same kind of thing, then actually, you can very easily end up getting struck in the weak spots of these particular gloves. And that is, although you've got these side pads I mentioned earlier, around the edge of the little finger and around the edge of the index finger, in between the rest of the fingers, so in here, here and here, there's basically no protection. It's a bit of cloth. You see this sort of pattern fabric. It's basically a sort of breathable material, which again makes it nice, so you're not going to be sweating buckets and be spilling water out of the gauntlets at the end of a fight. But at the same time, because it is just for breathability and perspiration, if you do unluckily get struck there, it hurts a lot. So try to avoid doing much of this. And your opponent, I know you're not going to go, hit me! But you know what I mean. And of course, you've got the same situation, but that on the inside the glove, but that really is to be expected. Even when you look at original medieval gauntlets, whether they be mail gauntlets or sort of leather gloves, or perhaps steel gauntlets with a leather mitten or glove inside, you always see that actually they don't really have protection on the inside the hand, because you can't properly feel the sword. You can't get a tactile understanding of the weight and the balance and those sorts of things that, although it might be underappreciated, I mean, you could be blind or close your eyes and you can wield your weapon, and you can know sort of its relative position, its weight and balance, those sorts of things, just by feel. And when you're protecting the inside the hands, that sort of advantage is lost because you stop being able to feel it, and also it starts to separate, the thicker the padding, the more it's going to basically force your hands open to try and get the same grip, and that will make you even more likely to get disarmed by someone who is, just trying to disarm you in grappling, or just hit your weapon too hard. So again, it's good to have these parts inside the hands, quite, well, thin, but just sort of keeping the glove together, keep it nice and tactile. And also, well, give it closer, I don't know if you can tell properly, but there are some perforations, which again, it helps with perspiration, so that could just be like this, and nice bit of air wafting in there, and breathability, wicking I think they tend to call it in some cases. It's very good for that. So again, with regards to things like sweating, it's quite useful for that. Just besides that, in terms of one of the things I find people worrying about a lot, tip of the finger protection. Granted, I can very much understand that some people would want to get those plastic fingertip protectors, which go inside the gloves inside, just to keep those tips of fingers protected, because they are quite vulnerable, and even with an enclosed hand, sometimes if a weapon gets around, maybe not the index finger because that locks with the thumb, but the rest can occasionally get struck. And again, if you're using your offhand, to do some grappling or attempts at things like that, they can occasionally get struck. With these gauntlets, they do reasonably protrude and protect the ends of the fingers, but they aren't perfect, I have to say. The thumb, I find it does quite well, and it sort of, if I show you now, it sort of curls around, so it does start to sort of envelop over the top of the end of the thumb, and that's quite good. But with the actual fingers, not so much. It's very much a flat surface, and anyone could just, in the unluckiest of circumstances, which when you spiral up will happen sometimes, those tips of the fingers will get struck. So although the thumb I'd say you should probably just keep as is, the main fingers I would recommend potentially looking into some reinforcement if you like to sort of tinker and modify a bit, or just get some off-the-shelf fingertip protectors, pop them in there, and you should be fine. So those are really some of the only the only disadvantages with these. And yeah, I mean, you've got the actual pads, although with things like, again, steel, the pads on the fingers and thumb, actually no, on the fingers they seem to be a little bit soft. On the thumb, I don't know if it's maybe thicker, maybe just because it's broader and spreads the force more, but I find doesn't actually cause you as much pain. I mean, if you look at these, obviously my thumb is not that big. It broadens it, and again, it's like I mentioned earlier with mitten gauntlets where it spreads the force more. This clearly is in effect with the thumb, but not with the rest of the fingers. Besides that, the actual main plates, I'd say, when you're looking at the back of the hand, those main plates have been struck there quite a few times, especially with this extra reinforcement band, I think, is copied from the designs on actual lacrosse gloves. They're very tough and sturdy, and they've got nice padding underneath. I mean, you can even just see from looking over the top of it, it's a thick plate, so you've got actual solid plastic, or yeah, some kind of tough material anyway. I can't tell, it's obviously an opaque covering, but it's got some kind of plate or hardened material, and then padding like foam or something like that underneath. So although I'd say the fingers might be quite weak against things like steels, to be honest, the actual knuckles and the back of the hand, the actual back of the hand protection, I'd say is definitely adequate. But that's my opinion. And of course, it's just got, in terms of the tying system, you've got here, you've got the lacing with the usual kind of drawstring, so I'll just open that up now, and you'll see there is also a Velcro strap. So that's just two ways to keep it secure. Granted, it is a bit annoying sometimes when you've got the string that is a bit long. It can end up dangling and can end up tying with weapons, and it can end up getting tied up with hands and all sorts of things. But if you ever are worried about that, or just to prevent it in the first place, what I always do is I just tighten it up like so, and then this can be tucked into the hand. Granted, it might sort of tickle you and itch you a bit, I've encountered sometimes, but you don't really get any, any problems that are too serious from that. So yeah, all in all, I have to say these would definitely get a good positive recommendation from myself, because I mean the sorts of things that are negative about it are more trade-offs, like again they're not mitten style, but they give you more finger dexterity, which is a good thing, or situations like the tips of the fingers, again it might be to do with, again, trying to get the right flexibility and tactile feel on your weapons. So they're certainly not bad, and there are definitely much worse out there. Again, I mean, they do actually, even on the fingers, they do overlap a bit, so they're not as bad as things like cricket gloves like I used to have, or, maybe things like motorcycling gloves. Those very much leave your fingers exposed and can cause you a lot of harm, whereas those you can't do too badly unless you get a really unlucky hit with a really, powerful stroke. So yeah, I mean, why don't you guys tell me below in the comments, are there any gauntlets that you've been using, anything you'd recommend? Or indeed, are you considering buying some gauntlets now? Maybe have a look at the ones I'll have. I'll pop a link in the description below to the ones from the night shop, because that's where they probably were bought by the person who gave them to me. And yeah, enjoy yourselves and see you in the next video, guys.